The nature of weightlessness, ionizing radiation, and psychological isolation need to be better understood in order to make spaceflight safer for astronauts of the future when we venture off to the moon, to Mars, and beyond.
The Interplanetary Podcast. The exploration of space for the benefit of all mankind. Your hosts here in London, Matthew Russell and Jamie Franklin.
And just to check, where was he from?
Canada, but I can only do the word a boot.
A boot
in Canadian.
Yeah, there's not. Yeah, that's a.
I'm not very good otherwise, but yeah, you know, I tried.
I liked it. I liked it very much. What a legend, Matt. So cooped up in a few tiny rooms, handful of other people, months at a time, with only access to video calls to loved ones. Is this beginning to sound familiar of a certain situation?
Yeah, do you know what? I'm getting quite bored of precisely that situation, Jamie. And how long has the lockdown been so far for us Brits?
Has it been a month yet? Is it 5 weeks? I don't know.
I have no idea. I've actually lost track of time.
I'm going to say 5 weeks.
So look at this chap on the screen, Jamie. This is a guy who was part of the Mars 500.
Yeah,
who did this for 520 days, which I think is pretty impressive.
Absolutely, it's very impressive.
So yes, this I think we've had a small taste of what it might be like to go on a trip to Mars. Do you want to see what that trip to Mars looks like?
Hell yeah, I do.
Oh hell yeah! Here we go. So yes, this, like you said, Jamie, this is going to be about the journey.
Look at that.
Oh, so 2020s. We were here last week. The last time we were at the Spacestore, and it wasn't last week. It was 6 months ago, I reckon.
Yeah,
we had a big old chat about Artemis.
We did, yes.
Which really is a return to the moon. But as you'll see in the logo itself, it kind of has a red line that represents the fact that really it's about going to Mars.
See, I didn't even realise that, Matt. You taught me something last time.
Yeah, absolutely. And Trump, in one of the most hilarious meetings of all time, and you have to watch the video of when Michael Collins and Buzz Aldrin visit Trump on the 50th anniversary of the moon landings. And this is what Trump sort of turns round to Michael Collins and says, what do you think about going to the moon? Is it beautiful? Is it beautiful? And Collins replies, Mars Direct, bypass the moon altogether. And Trump replies by looking at Jim Bridenstine and says, I mean, who knows better than these people? They've been doing this stuff for a long time. What about the concept of Mars Direct? And poor old Jim Bridenstine had to answer that after basically the whole policy of going to the moon.
This is the thing. And then, Matt, June the 7th, Trump went on to tweet, NASA should not be talking about going to the moon, arguing that we had already been there 50 years ago, of course. They should be focused on much bigger things we are doing, including Mars, of which the moon is part.
Yeah, he did
kicked all kinds of things off, didn't it?
Well, of which the moon is part. I'm going to give in the charity and think, yes, the Artemis, the moon is part of the Mars mission.
Yeah, right? That's so kind of what I'm going to give him that. Matt, he was being sarcastic.
He was being sarcastic, that's it.
Yeah.
So yes, there was a little report a little time before that by the Institute of Defence Analysis, by the Science and Technology Department, and they had essentially looked at NASA's mission to Mars and had been very, well, what shall I say, very dismissive of the timelines. And we shall get on to why. So let's have a kind of little look. So at the moment, how are NASA planning to do this, Jamie?
So NASA plans set forth the following steps for, of course, human missions to Mars. Number 1, testing of advanced spaceflight technologies on the International Space Station, the ISS.
Well, they're going to attempt some cislunar flight testing using SLS and the Orion multi-purpose crew vehicle. Not that either of those two haven't been massively overspent already. And of course, they're hugely delayed and COVID is not helping.
What about construction and operation of the Gateway?
Yes, well, the Gateway. See, that one's still up in the air whether that's even happening. But we'll have a little chat about that in a second.
We will. We will.
Now this is the big one, and I'm amazed how little gets talked about this, and we'll talk about this a little bit in detail. Is the Deep Space Transport or the Martian Transport, the DST, and it doesn't stand for Dubai Summertime. So that will.
Sorry to anyone calling in from Dubai.
Do they have a summer? I don't know whether they have a summertime, but who knows?
Just one long summertime.
Yeah, that is true. So yes, they're going to be checking out that on a sort of checkout mission.
And testing of the DST on a year-long flight beyond the Earth-Moon system, referred to, Matt, as you know, the Shakedown Cruise.
Are you going to write a song called the Shakedown Cruise?
I think definitely a verse and a chorus are popping into my head.
Excellent.
Yeah. There should be a dance with it.
Oh, definitely. The Shakedown Cruise.
There we go.
So we've got a human orbital trip comes after that. And this is the big one. This is what we're going to be talking about. The human orbital trip in the 2030s. And then
followed by humans landings on the surface in the 2040s.
Yeah, 2040s. So we're still quite a long way, aren't we, up from a possible Mars landing. So don't get your hopes up too far, unless obviously there's quite a few competitors like Elon Musk. But let's face it, in the last few days, Elon Musk has not been the person to trust very much.
He does love to get wild on the tweets. Matt, should we talk about the Gateway a bit?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, this one's very much in the air.
So where do we start?
Well, it's supposed to be assembled in the next few years. So between sort of 2022 to 2026, that kind of period. And that's where they're going to be staging missions to the moon and possibly to Mars.
It's beautiful. Human missions to the Gateway, of course, are to be launched using the SLS and the Orion multi-purpose crew vehicle.
Exactly. Now, this is the only picture I could find of the DST from the outside. So you can see the Gateway in the background and then the little DST with all its multiple engines. So
I'm into it.
Yeah. So although it's not specifically noted in NASA plans, it's obviously got to be part of the mission to Mars, because you can't go to Mars in an Orion. You've got to build something bigger, as we'll see. So this will go on a 1,100 day crewed mission. Will be the very first thing. Now that bear in mind, just keep that 1,100 day in your head. So yes, there's going to be that Shakedown Cruise in about 2029, they reckon.
Okay, and that's to be performed in lunar vicinity.
So that goes off for about quite a few months while they test it out. Then there's a few assumptions that have to be sorted out, which are what?
Well, of course, deep space transport provides habitation and transportation needs for transporting crew into deep space, of course, including, Matt, supporting human Mars class missions.
Yes, well, that's the big one, isn't it? So
it's the big one. It's the biggie.
And it has to be. They are building it at the moment. Well, they think they're not even building it. They haven't even got the designs for it, really. But it's got to. The assumption is that it's got to be used 3 times, and it's got to have minimal maintenance. It's got to be for about 4 crew.
Yeah.
And it's got to be capable of 1,000 day missions and be able to be launched on an SLS 1B cargo vehicle. So and with minimal outfitting in cislunar space. So it's going to have that
pressure.
It's going to have that shakedown, and then very little has to be done to it, because of course working on manufacturing in space still hasn't been nailed. So that would now, Jamie, you're going to like this. A bit of orbital mechanics. I couldn't resist. There's 2 classes of mission that you could go on to Mars, really, and that's one called opposition and one called conjunction. Now, here they are. Now, you can see if you go on the opposition one, you leave Earth and then you arrive at Mars after 180 days. Then you stay on Mars for about 30 days and then get off Mars and then fly back to Earth and get back home on day 640. So you've had a kind of almost 2-year out in the
Sounds good.
out in the DST, but you've had the benefit of having a Venus flyby. Now, the other version is to leave Earth, land at Mars after 180 days, same sort of time, but this time stay at Mars. So the first time they'll just stay in orbit, won't even attempt to get down to the surface.
Right.
So this will be like an Apollo 8 style mission, and then they will fly. Then by day 730. So they're going to stay there for almost 2 years. They will leave and arrive back at Earth on day 910.
Cool.
So that is a big, long mission. And but really, here's the bottom lines. So if you actually work out the delta V, and we've talked about delta V, this is every time you change velocity, you need fuel. So it's how many times you basically need fuel. So the more delta V, if you double the delta V, which essentially the opposition one does, you have to have 4 times the amount of fuel. Now that is a massive problem. So essentially rules out opposition style missions, which means you can't have these short 640-day missions. You've got to go for this 1,000-day conjunction class mission.
So that's pretty much 3 years. So this looks like it will be the first mission, a sort of Apollo 8 to Mars. What are you saying?
Yeah. Well, no, yeah, it could be called Artemis 8 maybe, but I think NASA are already up to Artemis 9 for the lunar stuff, but I don't
NASA
know.
are already planning, already planning 9.
Yeah. So this would probably be called Artemis 12. That's if they haven't abandoned the Artemis nomenclature.
I'm going to say 14.
Okay,
That's
Artemis
my bet.
14. Artemis 14.
There we go.
It would be quite cool if it was Artemis 11, but it's really more like an Apollo 8 mission because they're not going to land.
So Matt, let me take what you've just done and throw when and how long to.
Yeah, so
to you.
This is a really interesting graph. This is one of the best ways I've ever seen it displayed that shows how far away Mars is in certain years. In AU, that's AU down the side, so it's like 0.6 times the distance of Earth to the Sun.
I hope you all feel like you're in a lecture, by the way. You sitting comfortably?
You're sitting comfortably. So
there will be a test.
You will notice
there
that
won't be.
2018 and 2020 are excellent times to go to Mars.
Mm-hmm.
So, which of course was why there were so many Mars missions slated for these 2 years. And of course, unfortunately, the Europeans have missed 2018 and now 2020 as well. So the next one is 2022. So that's going to take a considerable amount more delta V or more fuel to actually get to Mars now. What you don't want to do is in 2027. Really, you want to go. The next window is this 2033. So that's probably when they'll try it. And this is all to do with the fact that Mars is on not circular orbit, but it's very eccentric, the orbit. So it's got.
We like an eccentric orbit.
I like an eccentric orbit, but it means it's on this. Not only do we are these windows opening every 2 years, you've got this 15-year cycle. That means that they're really good in 2018, 2035 and 2050, but you don't want to be doing it outside of that. It almost takes it takes half the energy to get to get there when it's 2018 than it would do in 2027, for example. So it's a big deal.
That saves you some cash.
Yeah. So this is the DS. This is what's going to happen with the DST. So it's going to carry 4 astronauts, and they're going to be transferred to the DST from Orion.
So should we look at that?
Yeah. Go hit me.
Okay, so the baseline human orbital trip to Mars is envisioned to involve a crew rendezvous with the DST in a high Earth orbit. Matthew, what do you think?
Well. Yes, well, you can kind of see that just over here, can't you? This like just there.
Yeah,
we're there, and so then the DST is going to use lunar gravity to assist Earth departure, and of course, it's going to do that with the help of a nice big chemical burn. Not the type that Loretta gave me, but a rocket engine burn.
But listen, Matt, it will use solar electric propulsion to transit to Mars, but use chemical propulsion to enter into a Mars orbit. Very important.
Yeah, and as we said, it's a conjunction class mission, so it's going to get into orbit around Mars and stay there for 430 8 days. That's 88 orbits.
And the DST will depart Mars's gravity well using a chemical propulsion departure burn, but use electric propulsion to transit to Earth. Best of both worlds.
It is the best of both worlds. And then, using lunar gravity is going to get back into Earth's sphere of influence.
Oh, if there's any sphere I want to be in, Matt,
I'm definitely being influenced by it right now.
Yeah, for sure. And Orion will then, of course, rendezvous with the DST and bring the astronauts safely back to Earth.
And now that has all taken 1,100 days.
Oh, man.
Man. And so an orbital mission to Mars requires all of those things to work really, really well. SLS, Orion, Gateway, and this DST. So
we'll cover this later, Matt, in more detail. But if we're getting a bit cabin fevery after a month,
yeah,
I mean 3 years,
where
you can't go outside.
Well, this is the cabin right here. This is what it looks like, Jamie. This is what the kind of envisaged to look like. So a lot of things have to go right with this, and of course, the really, really big one is the environmental control and life support.
That's the biggie,
which is called the ECLSS, which they have on the International Space Station. But that has to get to the whole new technology level. So that's currently at low technology readiness level, which is not good. And there's just a whole heap of other hurdles. So in detail, it's designed for a 1,000-day mission. Each crew member, there's 4 crew members, each crew member has to have at least 25 meters cubed. So they're going to get, so the whole area is like 100 cubic meters. So really you can see this module as being the size of, say, a large 2-bedroom apartment. Much like your house, I suppose.
Yeah, I guess it is.
Yeah. So yes, and that has to keep the 4-man crew, the 4 human crew, happy for 3 years. And so there's going to be private and public spaces, a galley, kitchen, I guess, medical and exercise systems, and research stations to keep them busy.
Matt, when I first read galley, I read it as gallery.
Yeah,
and then it made me think,
good.
Maybe they should have a gallery. You know? I mean, that would be good for your mental health, wouldn't it? Looking a bit of art.
Yeah, take some priceless art up with you so that people really care whether it burns up or not. So yeah.
This is the thing. So power and propulsion module, which may be used as a hybrid solar electric / chemical design.
And of course you've got to carry 3 years worth of food, medical supplies, propellant. So there's a lot to carry there.
That's a lot of pizza.
That is a lot of pizza.
3 years worth. The DSTs would be refurbished and refueled at the gateway between trips. So if it's to have a lifetime of 15 years and the ability to lie dormant for 3.
Yeah, so all those systems have to work for a very long time.
Oh, man.
So the whole thing. So you've got the Orion capsule, about 10 tons. The Habitat, which we're looking at now, 21 tons or 22 tons. The cargo section will be 26 tons. So there'll be another section just as big. You've got all the propulsion elements that will be 24 tons, the electric propulsion, and the chemical element will be 16 tons. So you're looking at just shy of 100 tons in total, this thing.
And how much fuel does that take?
Well, it's one.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. It's one big SLS launch, actually. So actually, the kind of size of it actually isn't a big problem. But I think 100 meters cubed is not a lot, is it? In fact,
I mean, surely they can fit another 10/10.5 stone human on there.
Yeah,
and I could go up and be crew.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think just your humour alone will help them. So, Jamie,
God help them.
I want to ask people at the end, how do they feel about that? And knowing that we've all kind of been on a mission, haven't we? We've all sort of had a little taster of what this might be like. So,
yeah.
But this one is probably in a smaller space. It's probably without any decent food. I mean, how annoying is it? How many trips you have to go down to the supermarket? I keep running out of tea bags. It's like an absolute nightmare. And I get fresh food.
And let's not forget that I think a lot of the things, certainly in the UK, that's just people are clinging onto is their hour a day that they're allowed outside.
Oh, my God.
You know, going for a long run, you know, getting some exercise in the fresh air.
Well, you know how cranky I get if I don't go for my morning walk.
Oh,
well,
you're calling it a walk now?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's before the walk. So no fresh air, no windows.
Oof.
And I think the big one is like you and I are able to talk now, and we've got this nice Zoom connection. But imagine if you're having to wait 4 minutes in between each of the kind of answers that we're giving. It'd be absolutely horrific.
Or even longer, as we'll hear. I got some quotes from Romain Charles, who did the Mars 500 project, and I'll read some out later. And I got longer than that for just one reply.
Well, of course, at one point, you're going to be the other side of the sun. So at one point,
34. He said 34 minutes was the most it got to.
Oh my God!
Because it's 17 minutes each way.
Wow.
So yeah.
Oh my God! Of course. And well, at some point, you're in a communication black spot.
Would you be annoyed, Matt?
You don't even get it at all.
Would you be annoyed, Matt, if we were talking and it was 34-hour delay, and I said, "Sorry, can you just say that again?" I wasn't paying attention.
If it's 34-hour, it would be even more frustrating.
Mental health issues.
We're not talking about interplanetary.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah, interstellar.
Well, Matt, should we look at the life support?
Yeah. So this is a picture. Just so I've never really seen this before, but this is what the International Space Station life support looks like. Isn't that cool? So that's a big old beast, and that's nothing. So there's you got Rack 1, the water recovery system. That's the smallest one that you can see, furthest away, I should say. Then you've got Rack 2, the oxygen generating system.
Well, what about taking a few spares? I mean, many of the technologies required for the DST are beyond the current state of the art on the ISS. So, you know, many technologies currently used on the ISS have a 2 to 3 year expected design lifetime. So components would be exceeding their design lifetimes during the journey. Oh, God. What'd you do there?
Well, I reckon that would be when you've got a system called life support. I reckon not having a reliable system is a little bit dicey.
Isn't it? Yeah.
So get this. So the ISS, it recycles something like carbon. It recycles the carbon dioxide back into oxygen with 42% efficiency, right?
Oh. Okay.
So that's not bad. But obviously they have to keep replenishing the ISS with oxygen, but they try and recycle what they can. Now, this one has to be at about 75% recycling efficiency or higher. So we're talking like a major upgrade. And then you've got all the medical stuff. So all the kind of things that you would need for looking after yourself medically on board, they actually think that they don't have that particular equipment because there's things like drugs that won't last long enough, don't have a long enough shelf life for the whole mission. And
well, not if you're around, no.
Exactly. Imagine how much Nurofen I'm going to get.
Always hoovering that stuff up.
Exactly. So and of course, once you run out of medical mitigation measures, that's pretty much it. You are in a life-threatening situation, let alone your blooming life support packing in.
Yeah, not good.
So there's an underlying stress issue all the time as well, that you've got this one system that you're really relying on. So you probably have to have a redundant system as well. So
I think it's good too.
Yeah. So space health, Jamie. This is, of course... Who's that chap, Jamie? Other than
it's got to be Mr. Kelly.
I actually thought it was Phil Collins at first, and I thought, I've accidentally put the wrong picture in.
I was going to say, where's the drum kit floating around?
So yeah, Scott Kelly, obviously, a lot of research for Scott Kelly when he went up, but there's so much we don't know about the health risk of going into space. But we know that there's some things that are really bad. Obviously, there's just all the things about microgravity.
Yes.
There's all the isolation-induced performance issues. Now, we'll go on to isolation much more in depth in a bit. But yeah, all of the technologies to alleviate these are, again, at this low technology readiness level. according to NASA. And, there's all these things that they're looking into, like stem cell-based treatments, low footprint exercise machines, and all those kind of things.
So if we look over the last, nearly 6 decades of human spaceflight, NASA has carefully set health standards for astronauts to prevent and mitigate negative health consequences, and of course, therefore, minimising the risk of death relating to space travel. I don't like even talking about it. It makes me nervous. But these standards are based on knowledge of more than 30 space-related health risks. And on that research, on known and potential space-related health risks. So, there's a lot that they're doing.
Yeah. I, in fact, really, if you think about it, no astronaut has died from health-related illnesses.
No.
In normal space operations. It's only been accidents, of course.
Normally just big fireballs.
Big accidents, horrific accidents. But, the actual health thing, no one's actually died yet. That's great news.
I'm touching wood, Matt, and I don't even believe in that. You've told me about this before.
Yeah.
I'm still going to do it.
I'm growing my beard as a kind of like a superstitious thing.
A lucky beard.
Yeah, lucky beard. So 1,100 days though, Jamie. That introduces a kind of unprecedented level of human space experience. And if you look at this graph, tell us a little bit about it.
Oh, here we go. So over the course of spaceflight history, humans have spent a combined total. What's your guess, Matt?
Well, looking at that, I don't know. It looks like about 10,000 days.
No,
that's trips, isn't it?
That is 50,000 days in space, with only 16 people going into deep space. And the number of individuals who have spent longer than half a year in space is a very small handful. So limiting our knowledge about the effects of these stays on human health. So really the amount of people who have, gone deep isn't that many.
No. And in fact, if you look at any of the sort of long duration, anything, all those ones that are 1 month to say 10 to 12 months.
Who's the longest? Who's got the record?
It is Valery Polyakov. Who did 438 days, but he did that on the Mir space station. Now, what is it about the Mir space station that's not really a good test? It's within the Van Allen belt, so he's not experiencing the radiation. He's also able to talk to his family on the phone instantly. It's
no 34-minute delays there.
No, so there is no mission longer than 90 days in deep space planned for the next 20 years, and there's not a mission other than the one we're talking about that's longer than 1 year in deep space.
Yeah. Oh, man, it's tricky.
Or even 1 year in low Earth orbit. So we just don't know. So this is NASA's 32 key health risks with 232 gaps in knowledge of the health risk of these types of missions.
I've got a few more gaps in knowledge than that.
Yeah, but this is pretty serious, isn't it? 1,097 tasks to complete to think about their human research program about humans in space. What do we have to know?
Well, it's thorough, isn't it? I mean, while information on the effects of radiation on astronauts in deep space is lacking, of course, previous space missions on the ISS have been useful for health risks associated with microgravity. So, we got some good stuff already.
Well, we know from Scott Kelly that microgravity changes quite a few things. It changes your cardiovascular system, which is all your heart and your circulation. That's not good. Your immune system really changes. And actually, the immune system to the people in isolation in the Mars 500 changed as well. So it's like a double whammy. Then you've got your skin gets changed as well. Your muscular system, of course, gets changed. Your bones start to disappear. Your kidneys start to get stones in them. And of course, the big one, your nervous system, your brain and motor function and everything else starts to get damaged. Now, That is bad news, isn't it, really?
So it's obviously important that they're working out. Is it twice a day on the space station?
Yeah,
I think they have to do at least. Is it 2 hours?
They do a lot of working out, but still their bone...
To build that muscle that they're losing.
Yeah, but they still lose it. Like the bone mass still goes down regardless of how much exercise they do. Well, and you can see it when they land back down on Earth. They can barely walk. You know, it's like, they have become pathetic. I mean,
So should we have a little look at mental health?
Yeah.
As we're touching on that?
Yeah, the mental health, I actually think mental health is the big one. I think mental health is the one that
Let's cut down to what we've all probably been feeling a little bit of. I think everyone's felt a bit of this in isolation. The University of Hawaii, with funding from NASA, completed a 365-day isolation experiment in August 2016 to better understand the potential issues associated with isolation during a future Mars mission.
Yeah, so that's the high seas mission, isn't it? So that that was in Hawaii, yeah. But one of the things that we can sort of use are things like research in Antarctica, which I actually think is probably more useful because there's something about the Antarctic missions. Of course, you genuinely are stuck out there.
Right, so you probably can't go for an hour's run every day.
No, you definitely can't. I mean, it is pretty inhospitable, but you can get help. You know, you are able to the military are able to get stuff out there and rescue them if they really have to.
Is that where The Thing was filmed, Matt?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Great film.
Great, amazing film.
Shout out to The Thing.
Of course, you've got the Mars 500 missions. Which we'll touch upon. Yeah. And a lot of isolation experiments going on in that. So there's lots of insights into the group dynamics, social behavior in isolation, and some of the things that you can do to intervene to make it better. But let's face it, none of those, the high seas, Antarctica, or any of that, really have simulated the conditions of this 1,100-day mission.
Right.
Because there's no hope of rescue or resupply. There's huge communication delays. And I think the worst is that no sunrise, no sunset, and the Earth is just barely visible in a
What would you miss
porthole.
most, Matt? And we'll ask this to people listening in now. What would you miss the most?
I think I would miss...
I know that you're by the coast. You'd miss a good sunset, wouldn't you?
I'd definitely miss a good sunset, and I think listening to the birds this morning. It was absolutely beautiful, and I've got the sun just sort of pouring in through my window right now. I'd miss that. I mean, it's just too much.
Surely the Ilfracombe fish and chips, the famous fish and chips.
I cannot.
I mean, you couldn't get a quick battered haddock on the mission, could you?
No, I was talking to an American the other day, and they, in fact, it was Stimpson, wasn't it? He actually said that when he was over in England and had fish and chips by the sea, he suddenly realised why the English like fish and chips. So to all our American and other foreign listeners, we haven't gone mad. Fish and chips is genuinely nice in England when you try it.
Yeah, honestly, don't diss us. We do have great food here, but fish and chips are the best in the world. We challenge you.
Yeah.
Our person who's from Washington, I forget your name, but let us know. Is fish and chips in Washington any good? and next time you're in England, please let us show you.
Yeah, absolutely. I will buy you fish and chips. Come to
there. We go,
and we can watch the ISS go over from the capstone.
We absolutely can. So let's talk about Mars 500 because we in podcast 89, Matt, had a lovely chat with Romain Charles. And, you want to give us some details, and then I'm going to read out some quotes from that very interview, which I think you'll find interesting.
Yeah, well, I think this is probably more pertinent than the high seas mission. I think it's much more about a journey to Mars for a start off. They actually thought about the whole thing. So it was an experiment that was funded and conceived, I guess, by the Russians, the European Space Agency, and the Chinese. So it was a big three-way collaboration between the three of the biggest space agencies. And yes, they looked into really looking at some of the effects of a trip to Mars. So they ran this between 2007 and 2011, and it was located near Moscow, the Russian Academy of Sciences. And yeah, an entire mock-up facility of the spacecraft, an ascent craft, and the Martian surface. So this was actually a simulation of not this Apollo 8 style orbital mission, but the 2040s mission that would come after.
Right.
And it was a 520-day mission. So actually more like the conjunction class more like the opposition class rather than the conjunction class experiment. So yeah, so when Roman was on, remind me of some of the things he said, because it was a fantastic interview.
So here's a good one. Starting off, the purpose of the mission was to simulate a trip to Mars and try to answer the big question: is man physiologically and physically able to endure the confinement of the trip to Mars? So, of course, that's the big thing. If we send humans on this trip, can we do it? He went on to say, like in real life, we all had our ups and downs during the 520 days. But luckily, as a team, they were not all at the same time, so we could help each other out. I never felt like I really ever wanted to get out of the module, but he says he does remember having dreams of sneaking out of the module and checking his emails, etc.
I remember that. Yeah, the dreams was a funny one. You know how you feel after a dream as well, that sometimes it stays with you, sometimes for days.
Well, I said to you last week, didn't I, that I woke up imagining that this whole COVID thing was just a dream, and that I could get on the train and go to work, and I realised very quickly that no, this is real life, as I'm sure he did. He went on to say that 5,000 people applied in Europe, and then they had to have a couple of interviews and, of course, a very deep medical check, and then training for 3 months before they whittle it down to 4 candidates and then down to 2.
Oof. Yeah. Yeah, I think this is like a big one, isn't it? Before you even go to Mars, you've got to be the right personality to even have a chance. Yeah. But how do you write the psychological tests for something that's unprecedented?
Well, he said that they had over 100 experiments we had to do, focusing on our cognition, interactions, and our mood. Lots of questions on sleep, if we were talking with each other normally, and lots about their dreams. And he said, I realised after, if there was a real trip to Mars, I would personally have to have hope of a return trip to make my duties worthwhile. I think that's a huge one, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think that that's what a lot of people would feel, that maybe they'd be happy with a 2 or 3 year trip, but really only if they knew they could come back to a real life.
Oh my God. Can you
Earth.
imagine if you started out on a one-way trip like Mars One was, and then you suddenly thought, oh no,
I don't like this anymore. What have I done?
I've just lost all hope. It would be absolutely...
Smart ketchup's run out.
Yeah, that adds a whole new sort of emotional element to it, doesn't it?
Well, the ketchup, or?
Well, yeah, I mean, well, the ketchup runs out. How do you have your frozen potatoes?
Oh, no, you've only got HP sauce. So last quote I've got here, Matt, is he said, because you asked him a great question of, what, obviously there's a big difference, isn't there? Knowing that deep down, this was a simulation. So there wasn't any big risk, and that you could get out if you wanted to. And he replied and he said, we didn't have that risk that real astronauts would have. What does being in a sealed tin can for a year and a half do to a crew of people? And on that aspect, they did have meaningful results.
Yeah, so, and actually, one of the amazing things was that they actually got on really well, didn't they? They actually finished the experiment. They all hung out with each other. They hadn't had any fallings out.
It's true. And he said that they were playing cards. I said, we were asking them about, what they were doing to keep their spirits up. And he said they were playing cards. What was the computer game? I think there was like a Battlefront game or some shoot 'em up that they were loving.
Oh man, computer games would definitely be really useful, wouldn't they? I think virtual reality is the one, isn't it? That's the thing that I think seems to be the sort of thing that would be just so useful.
Absolutely.
But I wonder.
Well, we had that very evening, didn't we, Matt, about mental health on Mars all those years ago.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things that we put forward was virtual reality, rain sounds.
Yeah,
I think that's what really helped him peak, wasn't it? Is running along to, the Scottish Highlands and stuff like that.
I think we actually ended up with virtual pets like they have in
That's true.
Japanese old people's homes.
Yeah, the little seal.
The little seal, little AI seal.
So caring for someone else.
Yeah, caring
is always
for something.
Very good.
We've got some details of the trip.
Oh yeah.
So it was 3 Russians, 2 Europeans, and 1 Chinese astronaut on the trip, and they simulated the entire mission, really. So I don't think we need to go into details. You kind of can see it from what we were talking about. The first few days getting over to Mars, staying at Mars for only a few days, then getting back into your spacecraft and going back to Earth. So, but here's something to really get your eyes around. This is what the Mars 500 site looked like. Now, I don't know about you, but that definitely looks bigger than 100 cubic meters.
Yes.
So,
just a touch.
So they've actually got 5 modules. Mind you, there's 6 of them rather than 4. And actually, who knows what difference that makes, having those extra 2 crew members, whether that actually kind of really affects things. So you've got different modules. So you've got a 50 cubic meter module, which is the Martian landing module. That's that one, which I'm assuming is this one at the end, perhaps. Then you've got the 100 cubic module. So that would be the one that is like the one that you're supposed to be staying in. So maybe that's this fella here. Or no, maybe it's not. Maybe, who knows? Maybe it's that one here. But yes, you've got the 100 cubic meter one, which is only a 2-berth living quarters, kitchen, diner, lab, offices, and medical. Then you've got the 150 cubic meters, which is your 6 living quarters, living room, kitchen, diner. So I guess that's this kind of area here is their equivalent of the deep space transport system. And then you've got this enormous 250 cubic meters food storage, gym, and greenhouse module.
Oh, the greenhouse. Oh, that would be a big thing, wouldn't it? Going to see some plants.
Yeah.
So
I wonder if
that must be another big thing.
Yeah, I wonder if they'd have a greenhouse module in the storage container. I doubt it. I don't think it's going to be that sophisticated.
What's that incredible sci-fi film where he takes a greenhouse into space?
Cool Runnings.
No. Is it Cool Runnings? No.
Oh,
isn't Cool Runnings the bobsleigh one?
Yeah. Oh no, yeah.
Jamaican bobsleigh
Silent Runnings.
Silent Runnings.
Silent Running. Oh yeah. Anyway, yes. Well, there's a few, isn't there? It's also in Sunshine, isn't it?
Oh, okay.
Yes.
There we go.
So yes, yeah. Do you want to hear what their regime was like? And actually, I wish I'd seen this a month ago because I think I might have stuck to this.
You might have done this. So let's start off with sleep. 8.5 hours. Pretty solid.
Mm-hmm. That is solid.
Period after sleep, 1.5 hours, including a 1 hour for breakfast. So that's all right.
That's great. This is very French.
Daily operating meeting, half an hour. Preparation for work, examination of the facility, familiarization with the timeline of the day, 1.5 hours. And then on work with the system, 2 hours. Implementation of the scientific experiments, 4 hours. It's a biggie.
Mm-hmm.
Lunch, 1 hour. Physical trainings, 1 hour. And personal time and supper, 4 hours.
So that does sound like a pretty decent day, isn't it? I actually,
and it's especially decent when you're eating because you finish your meal in about 3 minutes, don't you?
So I'd have
loads. I'd have
3 hours, 57 minutes for personal time
on Call of Duty.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Exactly. Oh yes, I really like that. I might actually make my whole routine exactly like that. I like your work with the system for 2 hours. Makes it sound very dark.
It's very 1984, isn't it?
Yeah, so we've got a little lonely astronaut here, and it's this is to represent the psychological experiments that they were doing. So they were looking at sort of 3 main areas that they needed to investigate, and that's the support of your psycho-emotional state. your general and professional psychological working capacity during 520 days of the expedition. The support for efficient intergroup interactions. And bear in mind, it was a multicultural crew as well. A couple of Russians, a couple of Europeans, and a Chinese. Poor Chinese dude, you know.
Yeah.
Interaction of the crew with the control center as well, over duration autonomous flight during increasing communication delay. So yes, so lots of psychological support, and they use the same methods that they do on the ISS, and that essentially that's books, films, music, the news, and stuff like that. So that's the kind of psychological support, and also taking into account the sort of crew member before they left, they would sort of give them stuff that was really meaningful. So that they would spend a lot of time choosing the things that would be really helpful for them once they were off. So one of the things that they were very pleased was the fact that the selection process had obviously worked really well, because there hadn't been any massive conflict situations, and no one had to get involved from the ground. So it's not like the mission control didn't have to radio and say, "Remain, wind your neck in, mate," or anything like that.
Yeah.
So that's pretty impressive, and the crew just really bonded very well, and there wasn't much to say about the cultural differences either, and they seemed to be able to leapfrog that with ease and get on with their activities. And they always communicated in a friendly manner, and they always spent time together, and they would do lots of lovely things for each other, like surprise birthday parties and holidays and Halloween and things like that.
I think that's the big thing, isn't it? Making those normal things continue. So it is possible to notice that the crew members somehow increase the time spent on individual activities. That does not hamper communication. That's key. There is not any division of the crew on language or any other interests. Also, the commander has the authority and is both formal and informal leader. Very important. Each crew member is regularly on duty, working at the main console, EU 150, that allows to learn some types of works that are on board engineers' functions. So again, very important.
Well, yeah. So they managed to just keep going. So basically they stuck to what psychologists thought that they were going to. So this Mars 500 was actually really good news in terms of how things were going to work. The one thing that did concern them was things like sleeping. How do you get into sleep? And Diego Urbina was one of the other ESA Marsanauts, and which is what they were calling the Mars 500, Marsanauts. And,
I like it.
Yes, he said, although there was an issue with sleeping patterns getting out of phase, it is amazing that the human body can adapt to total lack of sun.
Wow.
I don't know what accent I was going for in the end.
I liked it.
Yeah, I don't know what it was. Jamie, this is the inside of High Seas.
Here we go.
Now, High Seas, again, was really successful, but of course they got to go outside and wander around, a bit like we do. What wasn't successful was future High Seas missions that almost ended immediately when someone got injured. And I guess that's because someone got an electric shock off something within the in this dome.
Yeah.
And that was it. That was the end of the experiment. You know, it was just like only a few days in and it was all over.
Ouch.
And you think, God, if that had happened in real life, it would be doom. And this is the British Antarctic Survey. And yes, obviously a lot of stuff has come out of looking at how people cope with being there. And
I love the look of that.
Oh, no, that's great.
Cool,
it's
isn't
very, very cool building. But yeah, imagine how isolated that feels.
Yeah. Not sure I'd want to spend 3 years there, though.
Well, or the sort of 3 months in utter darkness.
Or 3 months.
Yeah.
Good call.
Yeah. Or 6 months. I mean, you'll be there for a long time, I guess. So yeah, there's things that happen on those. And I love this quote. It says, "Just as it may take a village to raise a child, it will take the entire crew to successfully conclude a long duration space mission." That everyone basically needs to be at the top of their game. That you can't just have individuals working for themselves. This is like a group effort to get everyone through.
Absolutely.
Now, isolation I think is the one that could go terribly wrong. So this is a quote that I saw by a chap called James S. House, and it says, "The magnitude of risk associated with social isolation is comparable with that of cigarette smoking and other major biomedical and physiological risk factors. However, our understanding of how and why social isolation is risky for health, or conversely, how and why social ties and relationships are protective of health, still remains quite limited."
Incredible stuff. So, let's look at it. Let's look at isolation to start with among the elderly, Matthew.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, social isolation impacts approximately 24% of older adults in the United States. Approximately 9 million people. That's a lot.
That's a lot. I wonder what the figure is in this country. I should imagine it's very similar.
I reckon it probably is.
I think we treat our elderly very similar in this country to America. And I know it's very, very different in other countries where, you stick your in old people's home here and then they sort of get lonely, don't they? Whereas
it's in older adults, it's associated with an increased risk in poor mental health and physical health and the increased mortality. I mean, we're all going to start thinking about it.
Yeah, and isolation as well with people. If people feel isolated, you get this kind of higher blood pressure, high cholesterol, stress goes through the roof. High cholesterol. Stress goes through the roof. And this is the big one. Your immune system starts to get weakened. And we've talked about this before. Viruses that you've had before, like chickenpox, they can escape the prison that they're in, and you can get them again. And it comes out as shingles. So weakened immune systems is never good. So
for everyone listening in, I was trying to get Matt to make me feel better about the situation, and then he went on to tell me about how things like chickenpox lives in your spine and can break out as an adult and give you shingles, which is obviously life-threatening. So thanks for making me feel better, Matt.
So who knows? You might have a similar sort of situation with COVID-19.
Oh my goodness!
I don't think so. I don't think it's that type of virus, but it might be. I think there's very little known. But it's one of those things, isn't it? Some of the astronauts that are heading out on one of these Mars missions might precisely have had chickenpox, and then suddenly they're breaking out in shingles on one of these trips.
This is what we've got to think about.
But isolation itself, scientists have known that isolation causes adults to become depressed. And when you get depressed, you actually seek isolation. And then you get into this spiral of becoming more and more depressed. So it's very, very hard, isn't it? It's one of those things where once it starts to happen to an astronaut, they could go downhill very, very quickly. And we've only done experiments that last 500 days. What would 1,000 days look like? I mean, that's the one that I'd be really interested in. So when they do this mission, this is going to be the first time they're going to try it. It's going to be like, this is the first time we've ever seen anyone go 1,000 days where it's them on their own. It's just crazy.
Absolutely, yeah.
I thought there's one last thing that we should talk about, and that's solitary confinement.
Yes, absolutely.
Because what happens if the three other members of your crew die, and then you're on your own in solitary, essentially. Now, solitary confinement, we know, is incredibly bad for you. It causes people to often commit suicide or self-harm. It's really, really horrible. This is something that's just about as grim as it could possibly be. Humans do not like being completely isolated.
They don't. I mean, if you look over time, Matt, something less obvious but a bit more insidious happens because, of course, solitary confinement requires people to learn to live in a world without people. And that's the big thing, isn't it? It's a denial of meaningful social engagement with other people. So to tolerate that, you begin to structure your world, your psyche, around not having the presence of other people in your life. That's a big one, isn't it?
Oh my God, it sounds
Then
terrific.
Other people start to become immersive stimuli. to you. You've been isolated for so long, your social skills just begin to just drop. Horrible. I mean, as you mentioned a while ago, Matt, lots of prisoners have told how they feel uncomfortable around people after being locked away in their cage.
Yeah, so maybe there might be some horrible long-term neurological damage to people that have been isolated in that kind of way. So it's not might not be just a short-term depression thing. It might actually, after 1,000 days of it, might be pretty grim. So
this is it. But hey, we're going to end it on a positive note, aren't we, Matt?
Yeah. So in fiction, in films, Jamie, I thought that they have touched, haven't they, on these feelings of isolation.
They have. One of my favourite ones, Matt, as you know, is I think in Interstellar, where somebody pops on the headphones and it's just the sound of rain because the guy's feeling a bit down, feeling a bit homesick, and we miss stuff like the weather, don't we? But what about Solaris, Matt?
Oh, Solaris, yeah. So,
or Ad Astra.
Yeah, well, Solaris, of course. This is the picture here is the Russian original, but the remake is very, very good. Yeah, and I agree with you on that one, Jamie. It's often poo-pooed because it's like, how dare they try and do something on the.
No.
But Solaris is very much about that feeling of isolation and starting to see things that aren't really there. There's a great. We actually did a podcast with the director of the stage play for Solaris. If that's a nice listen, it deals with those concepts. But I really liked. Ad Astra. I had mixed feelings about that film. But
we weren't sure about the voiceover.
It's in the words of Peter Griffin. It insists upon itself.
Yes, it does.
So Ad Astra was the really interesting bit in Ad Astra is that you've got this really stoic, badass Brad Pitt character who's a bit like John Young. His heartbeat never creeps over 80, no matter what kind of space mission he's on.
This is it.
But he starts to lie about his psychological well-being. And one of the reasons why he's doing it is because he doesn't want to lose his space mission. And that's a very interesting point that a lot of American astronauts from the kind of Right Stuff era weren't open about their mental health issues. So there's a lot of this window of opportunity to see the stresses caused by spaceflight. In some ways got a little bit missed. And the Russians actually were a little bit more open about the stress and the horrors of spaceflight.
And as we said earlier, you won't know until it actually happens because it's impossible to simulate the fear, the loneliness that a real mission would portray. My goodness.
Yeah.
I still want to go.
Oh no, absolutely.
Send me up.
Yeah. It's funny, isn't it? I think when you're older, it might be better. If you're younger and your body's being bombarded with radiation, you haven't really got much of a hope. You've just got to live a long life with all these space scars. But maybe when you're older, it's not such a problem.
Thanks so much for having us. It's been really, really fun. We should do this again. And if you've got any questions, Matt's going to give you our website of where to go to. We'd love to hear from people. And, where should people go to, Matt?
www.interplanetary.org.uk. A massive shout out to the Spacestore, who've been real great supporters of ours.
Yes, thank you so much, guys. Legends.
So, yes, awesome place.
If you haven't been to the Spacestore, what are you doing? Get yourself down there.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, we're all still on our trip to Mars. But just imagine that it's like going to Mars. Yeah, you could role play the whole thing. You could pretend that you're on the trip now, and then when you get to the Spacestore, ask them for a Mars simulation. Job done.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye, Spud Cats.